invite people to ask questions?
Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Rob Weiss. Welcome to Sex, Love, and Addiction, this discussion group we have every week on sex and relationship healing. It's my turn this Monday, as I'm here every Monday at 5 o'clock to answer questions about sex, love, and addiction. I show up here in part out of service because it's an opportunity for me to learn, for me to grow, for me to give things away that I don't get to give away very often. And also, I'm acutely aware that experts are hard to find, experts are expensive, and experts, 9 out of 10 of you will never get to the right one. So I'm not saying I'm the right one, but I've got some good information after 25 years of doing this work. And Tammy has been kind enough to sit here with me once a week and ask questions that you guys have, and I'll answer them. So what we're here doing is really, so Tammy wasn't here to introduce it. So this is a weekly Q&A. You will not come up as your face will not come up, your name will not come up. So this is completely confidential. It's an opportunity for you to ask questions without being afraid of who might see you, who might hear you. No one knows who you are. And Tammy will ask the questions and I'll answer them. If you want to be more involved with these kinds of things that we're doing, we have, I think, about 12 or 15 online groups running like this one. There are webinars, there are educational sessions, there are support groups for male addicts, for female addicts, for gay and lesbian people, for professionals, all kinds of groups going on, partners. And all of that is free to you on Sex and Relationship Healing. If you go to sexandrelationshiphealing.com and you simply click on webinars, these are all our volunteers, and all our volunteers are professionals who are giving their time, like I do, to help answer questions and support you guys. So please make use of this resource, because if you don't show up in the rooms, our folks will probably quit. But anyway, I am here to answer questions, and they're about sex addiction, love addiction, intimacy disorders in general, porn addiction, those kinds of problems. I've been an expert in the field for, I wasn't an expert to start with, but I've been in the field for 25 years. I've written 10 books on sex, love, and addiction. I've opened 5 or 6 treatment centers, probably as good as you get to a decent answer, given that I don't know you and I don't know the details of your life. So know this: when we ask a question, we'll probably generalize it a little bit so that everybody can learn from it. And this this information is recorded and posted on sexandrelationshiphealing.com for future listening. So if you're sitting here and you say, oh my gosh, my wife needs to hear this, or my boyfriend, whatever it is, you can go back and play it again. We're always glad for you to come visit us. So with that, we'll give you more information on other things we do and other stuff that's available to you, but why don't we get started? Tammy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, I am Tammy Verhelst. I've been working with Dr. Rob. I've known Dr. Rob for like 12 and a half years now. So it's been an awesome relationship, and I'm privileged to be here and kind of be his sidekick for these webinars. I do one, like Dr. Rob mentioned, I do one with John Taylor Mondays at noon Pacific time on Rockin Relationships. It's just a general relationship building skills. Today we talked about negotiation, which is a great one. It'll post on the website by tomorrow, I suspect. So check those out. But if you have questions, we'd love to answer them. So put those in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If for some reason that feature isn't working for you, every now and then there's a glitch on that, then feel free to put that in the chat. But it's a lot easier for us to deal with them in the Q&A. Go ahead.
2 more things. If you want to reach either of us if you want to reach us privately and you don't feel comfortable posting something here, but you really have a question, or you really want to know something, you can write Tammy at seeking, you can write, what is it?
Tammy, T-A-M-I, I'm a 4-letter word, T-A-M-I at seekingintegrity.com.
And Tammy is real good too. She's always glad to refer to therapists around the country, or treatment programs that we work with, or folks we know. We don't get
qualified.
Yes, we don't get kickbacks.
A lot of non-qualified.
Thank you. We don't get kickbacks for our referrals, but we do like to refer to people that we respect. I do want to say, Tammy, this is purely visual, but I noticed that I'm very cool. I'm in the grays, and it's very cool here. You are all warm and yellow, like a summer flower. I don't know. So, but
I'm in Arizona. We're in warm.
And I'm at the foggy beach, so that makes perfect sense.
You're wearing a sweater. I'm wearing.
I am. It's cold here. Yeah. All right, we got lots of questions. Okay. Let's get to them.
Here we go. What do you do when you find out your partner has lived a total separate lives for decades, going into treatment, and still leads a double life when they return? Do SAs ever become dangerous once they're outed? There's a
So I'm
couple
not sure.
questions there.
Yeah, which can you feed those to me in
I
order?
think, what do you do when you find out your partner has lived a total separate lives for decades, goes into treatment, and still leaves a double life when they return? I think that's one question. And then, is there a danger?
So the first question, let me take on the first question. It is expected that anybody who's an active addict and in your life is probably leading a double life. They're lying to you, they're keeping secrets. It doesn't matter whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling. Part of being an addict is to lie and have a double life and compartmentalize parts of your life so that the people who you don't want to learn things won't learn about certain things and, all of that. So the goal of treatment is to integrate your life so that you have integrity. In other words, you're one person. So the person is not off doing this while they're telling you they're doing that, while they're doing this with somebody else. That's addiction. Recovery is being one person with one set of values who lives that way. And so, and it's an interesting question because, the first half, like, what do you do if your partner has been living a double life, is like, well, sadly, that's the experience of most of our partners and most of our family members, and they have to adjust to the fact that this is not the person they thought they were, and this person has a lot of problems, deep-set ones that they didn't expect, and how do they want to live with those? So the first half of the question is like, it's sort of like, it's not going to be the same, I know this, but I'm just going to say it like this. It's kind of like you found out your partner has cancer. Okay, I found out that there's this huge thing that's going on with them that, okay, he knew about, but I didn't. Still, we didn't know about it. Now we've got to deal with it. We've got this huge problem we've got to deal with, and we got to decide if we're going to deal with it as a couple or break up. That's kind of how it happens. But the second part doesn't make sense to me because someone who comes out of treatment should not be living a double life. The whole point of going to treatment is to eliminate a double life. Now, if I was married to you and you said to me, I don't care if you look at porn once in a while, that wasn't really a problem for us. And I look at porn once in a while, it's not a problem for us because we've discussed it, it's out in the open. Every couple gets to decide what works for them and what doesn't in terms of recovery. But what doesn't work in terms of recovery is continuing to lie and tell secrets and live a double life. So what you're telling me is this person went to treatment, but they didn't really come back in recovery. I'm not sure that I would be able to have that relationship.
And it goes back to my point about their qualified help. So, and then the second part of that was the danger. So, do SA ever become dangerous once they are outed?
Well, I don't know what you mean by danger. I've seen sex addicts get very, I've seen sex addicts who don't want to work on it, who really just want to be left alone, get very oppositional. I've seen them be really nasty in divorces and stuff like that. But, you can't control my life. But as far as somebody who has no history of violence or abuse, being violent or abusive in recovery, that's just not how I usually see it. You're usually, and most of the spouses here will tell you, that what we usually hear complaints about is stuff like this. Like, my husband or wife went into recovery, they're doing better with their sexual problems, they seem to be being more honest with me, I think they're getting support, but they're still an asshole. Like, how do I deal? Or they're still narcissistic, or they're still not entirely honest with me. And those are a different set of problems because it's not about living a double life at that point. It's about learning how to be a responsible and empathic partner. And just because you learn how to stop acting out your addiction and stop hurting actively the people in your life by acting out sexually, that doesn't mean that you also have learned how to be a kind, empathic, non-narcissistic partner. That takes more time. So that's a more typical question that I might get asked here.
Okay. Next question. I've been married for nearly 30 years. I am guilty of being addicted to extreme objectification, pornography, and excessive masturbation and associated lying the entire relationship. My out-of-the-blue disclosure of sins to my wife, very painful, was 8 months ago, only because she was begging for a polygraph test, which was never taken. I could have been cold turkey on pornography and masturbation since my disclosure. Or I take that back. I have been cold turkey on pornography and masturbation since disclosure. Although I have had occasional slip-ups with objectification since then, it is getting easier to avoid. I have read many books, and they have given me helpful guidance, including Out of the Doghouse. Unfortunately, none of the wisdom is available to me when it counts.
Right.
I resort to immature sulking and endless I'm sorries. I attempt to avoid uncomfortable topics and am typically insensitive, defensive, narcissistic, and lack empathy during conversations. My intellect understands the trauma I have caused my wife. However, when it counts, I am an insensitive jerk. Any suggestions?
Well, first of all, I really like you. I just want you to know that. I have respect for your process because you are aware of this. And that's, believe it or not, 90% of the issue.
It's huge, yeah.
It's huge because the person who says, oh, it's not me, it's just my wife who's being difficult or bothering me or she won't get over it, that's not the guy who's really understanding what's going on here. And so I really appreciate that you acknowledge that you're the one who caused this pain, you're the one who caused all this trauma, you're the one who kept all these secrets, and you ruined your marriage. And so your wife, as you say, and I agree, has every right to be angry, hurt, and never not look at you with a very happy face for a really long time. The question is, though, how can you be non-reactive? How can you not be defensive, not get angry, not sulk, not pout when she's not being the person you want her to be, because Lord knows you're working on this, and why isn't she being nicer to you and all that stuff? And so here's a few clues. Not necessarily the right ones, but there are a few. Number one, I think you should read this to your wife. What you just wrote here, read it to your wife so that she understands that you understand. I get that you don't want to be full of I'm sorries, but you know what? For a while, we may be, but at least it's been predicted. You can say to her, look, I'm doing my best to work on this and I may end up in that place again, but I'll give you a better example. I have a really good friend in my life, a good friend who I like, but we yell at each other sometimes. And sometimes we say really mean things to each other. And that's the nature of this relationship with this friend. I'm not a particularly mean person. I don't particularly get into arguments, but this particular person, the way we do it is that. And sometimes we've said some not very nice things to each other, but we really care about each other and we really want to continue to be friends. So what we have agreed, this is absolutely true, and I'm 60 years old, so I still make these agreements with friends. You know, we made this agreement. You and I are doing the best we can to have a healthy relationship, and sometimes we may slide off into being angry or saying the wrong thing, but we both know that it's our intention to have a healthy, kind relationship, and if we run off the rails, we will go back to try to fix it. I can do that, because that means I'm in a relationship with someone else who's also accountable for their behavior, and we can own our own stuff, maybe not in the moment, but over time, it is our intention to have a healthy relationship. So as long as your wife knows that you know that you tend to sulk and pout and not meet her needs but that you are aware of it and that you are able later to go back and apologize, explain yourself, and move forward, that's really all that matters for the moment. There's nothing wrong with being imperfect. And there's nothing wrong with not being the person your wife wishes you were, even though I wish you were and you wish you were. You're not there yet. Okay. But at least you're saying you want to be and you see what the path is. And to me, that's 90% of the battle, because now you can predict what might go wrong and how you're going to fix it in the future. And over time, I guarantee you it'll be easier and easier for you to be able to work through this stuff. I will say to you, from my own personal battery, that there are some of us who come out of recovery and we have some longstanding issues with depression and reactivity and anxiety and narcissism that for some of us are best handled with medication. And I would suggest to you that if you're in a process and you're really, really working on this really hard, and it's been 6 months and you're still struggling with the bare minimums of like, don't pick on me, I found personally, and I have many, many clients who just they're less reactive on certain medications like SSRIs or SNRIs, antidepressants. And it may well be that could be something that you might consider. But I don't know where you are in your process or how accepting your spouse is of how you're doing with it. But what I love, and I hope every spouse in the room loves this too, is you're the husband who's saying, I don't want to be this way. I don't like how I'm acting toward her, and I want to work on this. And to me, that's more important than any moment that goes bad.
I'm with you on that. And I mentioned earlier that John Taylor does a Rockin Relationships, and he did a couple in the series that I think you'd find really helpful. But there was one that he talked about, like the timeout for 20 minutes and you reassess and everything.
How to handle conflict.
Yeah, and I think that might have been the title, but honestly, it was good, and we had people that took those tools and came back and said, I've been using that, and it's helped. And so I think that there's some very practical tools that you'll find. So the John Taylor Rockin Relationships previously recorded webinar, check that out. You may find something useful there. So Ready for the next one?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one.
If kids don't understand what sex is, why is molestation so damaging? I understand adultifying kids by putting too much responsibility on them. How does this impact them, though?
So I think that's a really good question in a lot of ways, because we all know that early exposure to adult sexuality, or if you don't all know, early exposure to adult sexuality is harmful to children. Certainly prepubescent children, anybody under 14, they just shouldn't be seeing that stuff. And, you know, this is why in some ways porn is a problem in our culture, because underage kids have access to it and it influences them in ways that will affect them the rest of their lives. When I think of a young child, I think of a developing brain. And I realize that the brain develops in certain stages. And there is a stage where we are able to accept and understand and begin to address adult sexuality. And that stage really doesn't come along until we're into our late teens. And even then, it isn't time as kids to be having sex with adults. So I can only give it to you as a metaphor, because this to me is this is how I think about molesting a child. When I was a young boy, I remember my mother had a rose garden. And she had all these beautiful roses that would bloom in the summertime. And I noticed that they were really, really pretty when they were little buds. And as a kid, I thought, well, maybe if I take one of the buds off the rose bush and I pull it open, that it will become like those roses. You know, it will just open up and it'll smell nice, and I can just do that myself. So I used to take the bud that had not yet bloomed off the rose and peel it apart. Sometimes I would peel it apart on the rose bush. And what I noticed was if I left it on the rose bush, those buds that I had tried to pull apart to look into before they were mature, they did blossom, but they never looked the same. They never blossomed in a healthy way. They were broken, or they were twisted, or they were, in other words, when you encourage maturity in a being that is not ready to be mature, that being is going to be harmed. You're giving them information and experiences that they are not capable of dealing with. Someone who is under the age of 11, their brain has literally, truly, in pure chemical terms, their brain has not developed enough for them to understand the meaning of adult sexuality. And so if they are exposed to it in a consistent or meaningful way, it is overwhelming to them. They experience it as trauma, as abuse, because as a problem. They may not know it's abuse, but it overwhelms them emotionally, because we are not set up as beings to accept that level of stimulation or understand it at that age. And therefore that child is going to be harmed. And what's going to be harmed is their development, their growth. It's like that bud on the rose bush. It will never bloom the same way. You know, I listened to one of my favorite sort of feminist, gender-focused videos right now. Something I just really love watching, and I recommend everyone watch, is something called Nanette on Netflix, and it's by a woman named Hannah Gadsby. And Hannah Gadsby is a comedian, and this is a recording of her comedy routine in Sydney Opera House. She's a very popular comedian in Australia and now here in the States. But Hannah Gadsby talks about her abuse, her physical and sexual abuse as a child. And the way she talks about it, I think, is the best way that I can think of it, because I had sexual abuse as a child, and I think of it this way too. You know, I am incredibly intellectual, so I'll say it for me. I'm smart, I'm talented, I'm not bad looking, but I will never thrive. I will never thrive as a human being in relationship to other human beings the way I would have thrived had I not been molested. I can use my intellect, I can use my sense of self, I can use my, you know, every skill I have, but there are parts of me that are just plain broken, that were broken before they were ready to be in place, and they're never going to be fixable in the same way. I will always be fearful and have issues around intimacy and sexuality, always, because of what happened to me then. And there isn't a way, by the way, those of you who are trauma survivors, we don't fix trauma. We don't eliminate trauma. Anyone who tells you that they can get rid of your trauma is lying. What our field is about is we help you to learn to live with trauma, to adapt to what happened to you, to find ways to make it less triggering and put it in a place where you can move on from it. But it doesn't ever go away. And if you cut my, it's the same with our emotionally, with experiences that they are not ready for, it will affect them the rest of their lives. And you can never take that back. That's kind of how it goes. Do you want to add to that, Tammy?
No, it's
Are you
terribly.
there?
Yeah,
Hello?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough topic. And I keep thinking too about how many children were also, sworn to secrecy. And so it's this whole, I have to hide this. And, I wasn't sexually abused, as a child, but, I can't help but wonder, about the fear and, not just the physical trauma, but the emotional trauma that they experience. So it's tough.
And thanks, Tammy, because I will say, it's like when I talk about it, the child is not old enough, think about this. If you saw something out, I don't know, if you saw someone hit someone on the street, you're old enough to understand that what two adults fighting on the street might mean and what you need to do in relationship to that. You call the police, you back away, whatever it is. But if you were 5 years old, you wouldn't have any idea that would mean, that those people were on the street fighting. It would just scare you. And that's really the issue, is that young children don't have any perspective or understanding or information about what's happening to them. And so when that happens to them, and Tammy's right, often someone who molests them will say, if you tell anyone, you're going to come to harm, or your parents will come to harm, or so they never tell anybody, and they live with this forever. Let's move on.
Okay. How do you suggest handling triggers?
Okay. Well, let me explain what a trigger is. A trigger is a trigger happens when I experience something that leaves me with the desire to use or act out. So let's say that, I don't know, let's say Tammy and I can't stand each other and we just absolutely hate each other, and I try to avoid her as much as possible, and I've been able to stay sober, but last week I ran into Tammy and she makes me so crazy and I got so mad I just went out and drank. In other words, my running into Tammy was a trigger. The upset, the feelings that it brought up, it left me with a kind of, screw it, I'm just going to do what I want because Tammy drives me crazy. So triggers are things like, well, they're not always a person. They can be like travel is a big trigger for us when we're alone, and a lot of unstructured time when we have like a holiday weekend and no plans. And there are many things that are triggers for acting out. And the best way to handle any kind of trigger, and this is always the right answer, is to reach out to another person. You can go for a walk, you can meditate, you can take a hot bath, lock the door in your house, don't let yourself out. I mean, do what it takes to not act out. But if you really want to find a way to begin to heal and find peace with those triggers, the key is to reach out to other people and not be alone with them. And anybody who's really skilled in recovery knows not that they're not going to get triggered, because even the person who's been in program forever and done lots of really good work still may feel triggered occasionally to act out. But what do they do with that trigger? Do they say to themselves, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I've been in recovery for years and I shouldn't have these triggers? Or do they say, wow, well, this is just, I'll put it the way, I had a sponsor once, and when he would have a trigger, I don't know if I ever told you this, Tammy, my sponsor, Michael, would say, I feel like acting out and I think that's a flare-up of my mental illness. And, he would just say, I feel like drinking. I think I'm having a little flare up of my mental illness, which meant that it was a little joke. But what he meant was important, because what he was saying was, I'm having this desire to do it, but I don't pay attention to it like it's real. I'm having this desire to do it, and that reminds me that I have this problem that I need to address. And the way I need to address it is by staying in contact with other people. I will also say that triggers on the street, when you see someone and you find them attractive, the best thing to do is we have something called a 3-second rule. And I'll very quickly give that to you. It looks like this. I see someone attractive on the street. I look at them. I notice that they're attractive because I'm human and I'm on the planet, and it feels good to be alive and notice attractive people. That's the first second. In the second second, I look away. And in the third second, I think of them as a daughter, as a sister, as a mother, as a friend, not as a sex object. And then I don't look back. So in that 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, I allow myself to look and feel like someone's attractive. I make a deliberate attempt to look away. And without looking back, I think about them or pray about them or give them the dignity they deserve as a human being. And then I move on. And by not staying in that moment, I get to not stay stuck.
Great. I love what your sponsor told you to. That I have not heard it that way. That was a great. So the first person that asked about the danger said, "I am in fear due to information recently gathered that he will hurt me, so he does not have to deal with it." Did I freeze up? Did I freeze up? Can you hear me? Oh. Okay.
You were having a little freezing, I noticed. But we can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can now. I think I'm going to mute my screen and see if that helps. So I'll be around, but I'm going to.
Hi.
Hi.
We reconnected.
Okay. So I'm going to ask questions, but I'm going to cut my video because I think that'll help.
I don't think it's a problem, Tammy. Go ahead and use your video.
Okay.
And we'll see if it goes again, we'll do that.
Okay.
But I want to get back to that. There was a really good question there, and I wanted to get back to it.
Okay. So the question was, I am in fear due to information recently gathered that he will hurt me, so he does not have to deal with it. So that's a continuation of the first question.
So I will say this: I have provided treatment in various treatment programs, or run or created treatment programs for 25 years. And we have a treatment program we run right now called Seeking Integrity. And if you want to learn more about it, look at seekingintegrity.com. And I can say that I am back in there for the first time in a long time doing therapy. And I'm actually actively involved in the program and enjoying working with folks. Not so long ago, I'm not going to say how long ago, or who, I had a patient at Seeking Integrity who, in my mind, did not really want to look at the issues fully. He had his own way of looking at it. He decided what it meant to him, and he wasn't going to move. In other words, he came to treatment with us to keep his wife quiet, but he had no intention of growing, changing, or looking at himself. And he thought that by being charming and engaging and fun with us, that somehow we would not notice that he was not invested in work. Well, he isn't. And this particular client, because he was completely and utterly unable and unwilling, I think, and unwilling to look at it, when I would really get in his face about stuff he had done and when he had done it, because he had no real answers, because he knew what it was, I think he looked at me like he wanted to kill me. And I know that look. I know when I have a sociopath in treatment. I know somebody who is looking at me, and then when I'm pushing stuff at them, you know, about their history, about their behavior, and they're not looking at me sadly. They're not looking at me confused. They're not looking at me like, oh my God, I can't believe this is me. But they're looking at me like, you know what? If you keep pushing this issue, I'm going to hurt you. I know what that looks like. And so, yes, there are people who will go through treatment or look at all this, but they only want to keep doing it the way they've been doing it. And when you push them, they get angry. And those are people that you really have to decide, is that someone I want to have or be in a relationship with? Because ultimately, you know, you're right, your safety is at risk. It's at risk on a variety of levels. You know, it's physically, emotionally, spiritually, maybe physically, if you ever have sex again, who knows who he's been with. I cannot imagine at this point in my life encouraging anyone to be in a relationship where there is such a profound lack of trust. And if you know that your partner's been acting out all over the place and is just sort of pretend healing to keep you quiet, I think you really have some very profound things to look at in terms of your own emotional and personal health, not to mention the health of your family and children, should they be around.
Okay, the next question is, found out that my husband had a 30-year secret porn addiction and says he's been completely sober for the past 7 months using self-control only. Although not in treatment, therapists have told us that all addicts are caught up in the shame cycle and have low self-esteem confidence. He will admit that he never had guilt or thought once about how he was hurting our marriage by lying or using pornography. Does this indicate narcissism, or is he just compartmentalizing?
Wow. Well, that's a good question. There's a lot of questions in there, I think. So, for example, if I'm in a, first of all, there's nothing wrong with looking at porn occasionally in your relationship. There just isn't. And you know, I'm not going to be the one to say that porn is bad, porn is dirty. I do believe that if you're consistently looking at porn in a way that undermines your relationship, so you are not as attracted to your partner because you're looking at porn, you're not as sexual with your partner because you're looking at porn, you're not as emotionally available, you're checked out. You know, if it's not occasional, you know, if it's really a problem, then the issue is that your husband may not have realized the degree to which it was affecting you. In other words, you might have said, well, you seem distant, you seem unavailable, we're not having sex as much, you seem not intimate. You may have been bugging him for a really long time to get closer to you. And it is possible that while he was looking at porn, he was also not thinking that his looking at porn had anything to do with the things you're asking about. Even though his lack of intimacy, his lack of engagement, his distancing might have been related to porn, you may not have known about the porn, and he may not have thought it was that important. That happens. So I have to give the benefit of the doubt here in the biggest sense, which is that maybe he's someone who really enjoyed looking at porn on a very regular basis, didn't think it had anything to do with his relationship with you, thought it was private and personal, and we do get to have private and personal lives, and just never told you. And now he's kind of saying, I don't get why it's hurt you or bothered you because you never knew about it and it didn't seem to be a problem for you before, so why does it bother you now? I can see all of that. But the reality is that in a healthy, intimate relationship, you should have known about this all along. Your husband's having sex with paper dolls online. I think that affects you and you should know. Couples should have a discussion. Is it okay if I look at porn? Is it okay if you look at porn? How often? When will it bother you? If it bothers you? This is something just couples need to discuss. So if you've never discussed it in the past, you know, I could buy into the fact that it's not an addiction for him, but was just part of his life and something he incorporated and didn't know that it was affecting you in the ways that it was. I'm not in your marriage. However, you may have been for years saying, something's wrong, something's not right. Maybe it's you're looking at porn. I don't know. You know, maybe he has been pushing this aside for the whole marriage because he is addicted to the porn and wants to hold on to the porn and doesn't want to see how it's affected you. So that might be, by the way, neither narcissism nor compartmentalizing. It might be someone who simply wants to have their cake and eat it too. He may want to keep using the porn, and therefore he doesn't want to see how it's hurting you because he wants to keep using it. And to really see how it's hurting you would affect his porn use. So here's the question. For me, always the real question. If your husband found out 5 years ago or 5 weeks ago or 5 minutes ago that porn really bothers you, why would he be fighting to watch the porn? Why wouldn't his priority be, I don't want my spouse to be upset, and that's more important to me than porn. So let me figure out what my spouse is upset about and how we can work this out, and porn may or may not return to my life. I mean, that is what would be important to me, would be my partner. So if the porn is more important to him than you are, that's something I would want to talk about. And clearly, the porn has been more important than your knowing about it, which means that he's had whatever reasons he's wanted to keep it a secret. I will say this to you. It is possible that he liked porn, looked at it a lot, and just suddenly realized that it really bothers you, and he's decided not to look at it anymore, and he doesn't have to and doesn't want to and isn't going to. So maybe he wasn't a porn addict. I don't know. But once he knows that this is hurting you, that this is bothering you, that this is upsetting to you, everything defers to that. You're his partner. You're his mate. Why would the porn be more important than your feelings? So I don't know why that is the case, if it's narcissism, if it's compartmentalizing, if he just thinks he's going to be able to pull it over on you a while longer. You know, I don't know. I think that bears discussion. But I would do this in therapy if it were me. I would bring your husband into therapy as a couple and say, I don't understand how you can sit there knowing that this hurts me, that this makes me feel less than, that this makes me feel like you're looking at other women, I don't matter. How can you do that and not have that matter to you? I think that's something to be discussed in therapy. And that's more important than the porn, in a sense. It's how do you look at me? How do you look at us? Do I have value and worth in this relationship? Or is looking at paper dolls more important to you? And if that were the case, addict or not, I think you'd have some things you need to think about.
Do you suggest explaining husband's sex addiction to our teenage children?
Can I say that in a really clearly? No. Can I say it again? No. One more time. Do not talk about your husband's sexual life to your children. Oh, do I need to say why?
I think elaborating would be helpful, because
Okay,
there
so
will
I
always
get,
be the, well, they need to know, they need to
no,
understand.
they do not need to know. What children need to know is that mom and dad aren't getting along, that mom and dad are fighting, that mom and dad have some issues, that mom and dad may need to spend some time apart. What children need to know is that whatever's going on with mom and dad, it has nothing to do with them. They didn't cause it. It's not their fault. And you will absolutely be there, both of you, to support them no matter what you go through. Children need to know that. And yes, when they see there's emptiness and fighting and distance and problems in the house, they need that acknowledged. Yes, mom and dad are having some struggles and not getting along. But I would never want my child to know what I or my husband or my wife was doing sexually, because that is not something that a child needs to know at 14 or 24. And I wouldn't want my child ever having that picture in their head of daddy having sex with other women. I just wouldn't, because they still have to look at me as their father and or their mother or whatever. So remember this, whoever you tell, you can't take it back. And I've seen many, many angry spouses feel very entitled. Well, screw him. I'm going to tell his mother and his sister and his kids, and we're going to tell the pastor and our neighbors. And then a year later, they're like, oh my God, I'm sitting here at Thanksgiving and all these people know about my sex life. And they realize that what they did in anger really didn't benefit the healing of their relationship. Now, you want to go to a therapist, you want to go to a 12-step program, you want to go to one of us and say, I freaking hate him, he did this to me, go right ahead. We are all over it for you. But your children, they don't really need to know the details of their parents' sexual lives. It will remain with them in ways, look, and I'll give you some examples. I've seen adult children find out that dad had cheated on mom, and now they will never talk to dad again, and he doesn't have any access to the grandkids. That's not right. That doesn't, I understand it. I want to protect mom, and I'm going to fight dad, but a 35-year-old man with 2 kids shouldn't be fighting that fight, shouldn't even be involved in that discussion. It has to do with you and your husband. And so please don't take detailed information about sex or cheating to children at any age. If you need someone to reach out to, don't reach out to your children. That's not their job. Your job is to support them, not them to support you. It's okay to come together as a family and all support each other when we're grieving a loss. But ultimately, those kids need to be relying on you, and you need to rely on other people, not them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In your experience, how long does it take for a spouse to begin trusting again? And when do you let them throw in the towel? I have told my wife about my use of pornography on and off since high school. I am extremely attracted to her and want to continue our intimate life together, but it seems she is really not interested. It's been 6 months since I told her. While I expect 6 months to 2 years, but if she simply cannot find someone she wants to be with, I do not want her to continue suffering in a relationship that will never make her happy. I know every couple is different and it's hard to make a call on something like this, but I'm looking for some guidelines.
Okay, well, a couple of things. Someone mentioned it earlier. I did write a book called Out of the Doghouse, and I wrote it as a guide for men who have cheated on women, either with porn or touching people, affairs, all that, for men to understand what it takes to heal the wound of betrayal in a woman. And so I would suggest, I'll make 15 cents, go buy Out of the Doghouse. It's on Amazon, read it, and you'll have a much better understanding of how to negotiate empathy and caring and responsiveness to what your wife is going through. That aside, if your wife didn't want to be with you, she wouldn't be with you. If she had decided to leave, she would have left. So the fact that she's there, either she's working with divorce lawyers and biding her time, or she's trying to figure out if this is a relationship that she wants to be in or not. And I think that if part of your job is to figure that out, there's nothing wrong with you guys, again, going to couples therapy. How do we proceed the relationship? Now, I don't know what you as the husband's experience is, and I want to say this, so many men who act out sexually and then they get found out and all of this, they find their spouse is cold. They find their spouse is distant. They find their spouse is no longer making the bed, doing the laundry, and helping with dinner. Their spouse is just another body in the house. And I don't think that means anything except that they are hurting and wounded and they need some time. I don't think it's up to you to make assumptions about what your wife does or doesn't want in your relationship. I think it's your job to ask her. And, do you have any interest in proceeding in this relationship with me? Do you think there will ever come a time when we will be intimate again? Do you think there will ever come a time when we can be romantic again? What do you think it would take for that to happen? very reasonable questions you can ask her, but she may be too angry to answer you outside of therapy or outside of an email. You know, there are many ways to ask them. The bottom line is, though, about your healing is that if I were married to you or involved with you, I would want to see a lot more from you than you're not doing it anymore. I would want to see you going to therapy. I would want to see you reading. I would want to see you going to support groups. You acted out this way for years and years and years and years. I would want, if I were your spouse, to understand. I would want to know that you understand why you did this, what it means to you, what's going to happen the next time you feel like doing it, where it came from, why you hid it from me, all of that. In other words, if you've simply stopped the behavior and put a smile on your face and tried to make everything better, it doesn't work that way. Getting out of the doghouse with a spouse that you have wounded through betrayal involves a very active process on the part of the person who is cheated. And if you're not very actively involved in that process, I can imagine that you have a distant spouse who's not really sure they want to be with you. So two things. I would read some more about empathy and healing and compassion and, you know, how to work with a spouse who's wounded in this way. And I would have some really direct questions for your spouse. And by the way, if she says, I don't know whether I want to be with you or not, the answer is not for you to say, okay. The answer is, when do you think you might know? Because you do have a right to know if your partner intends to go on in the relationship or not. It may well be that she's, you know, working with her divorce lawyer to get out of there as fast as possible. I don't know. I'm just not telling you. That could be true. Or she's going through a grief process, or she's going to love you again tomorrow. I don't know. But I think you're asking the wrong person. I think this is a conversation that you really need to be having with her, and having it with her a lot. Tammy, anything else on that for you?
No, I think all of that is sage advice. So here's the flip side. So now we've got a partner. How should the partner get over anger once the addict starts recovering and is sober?
Great question. So first of all, I don't think it's a spouse's job to get over their anger. I think it's a spouse's job to get into their anger, to experience their anger. You know, if I'm the addict, like, I want you to get over it as fast as possible and forgive me and have everything go back to normal, even though it was never normal in the first place. Now you know that. But your job, I believe your job as a spouse, your job is to be angry at me. Your job is to question everything about me and question our whole relationship and try to figure out if you want to proceed or not. That's your job. It is not your job to forgive me. It's not your job to cheer for me going to meetings and therapy. Do I need cheering? You betcha. That's what Tammy will cheer me on. My friends in recovery will cheer me on. My sponsor will cheer me on. My therapist will cheer me on. But when I come home to my spouse and I say, look, honey, I got a 90-day chip for not having sex with other people, it's your job to say, big fucking deal. So you were married to me for 6 years and had sex with other people for 6 years, and I'm supposed to cheer for you having 90 days. Really, you get to have all of that for a while. My experience is that spouses are going to carry a high degree of reactivity and anger for at least 6 months, maybe 9. And also it depends on what is your husband or spouse doing? You know, if the person you're married to is stop the behavior, being honest with you, going to support groups, going to therapy, working on themselves, being honest, not being reactive, not defending themselves, well, that's a lot easier to heal in relationship to someone like that. But if your spouse is still lying, still keeping secrets, still probably acting out, still defending themselves and trying to tell you to give them a break, well, that's going to never heal. And you're always going to be angry because they're not doing anything to help you get less angry. So, you know, part of this is I want to give you lots of permission to have your feelings. I also want to say that, and you asked me this, how do you heal your anger? You need to talk about it with other people. You know, we have a support group on sex and relationship healing for female spouses. Tammy will type in the chat when that meeting is. If you drop in the website and, you know, go to Sex and Relationship Healing and on that day and click on the webinar, you will be in a room full of other women whose husbands have cheated. And that's really important. I think that's the best place you can go. Because not only do you get a sense of what the healing process is like, what the trajectory of healing is, and how long it might take, and what other women are going through, but you get to be with other women who doubt their own sense of worth and doubt their own esteem and doubt their own worthiness, because they too have had somebody they loved and were connected to hurt them and lie to them and cheat on them. And I think the idea that you could be in a room with other women or other men, if you're a man, who have experienced cheating is extremely important. It's important for your self-esteem. It's important for your learning about the process of healing and forgiveness. One more thing I would like to mention. I haven't said this much here, but I will say this. Forgiveness. So here's a way of thinking about it. when I was trained as a therapist, and you probably all know this because it was very much talked about in the public, we learned not that long ago, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, maybe 30, that grief is a process, right? We learned that grief is about shock and denial and anger and bargaining and all these things you go through before you finally accept that that person died or that person hurt you or whatever you're grieving. Well, guess what? Forgiveness is also a process. And it takes a whole bunch of stages that you go through before you actually are in a place to forgive. There are a number of really good books out on the process of forgiveness. Why don't you pick one up or two and see where you are inside of yourself in the process of forgiveness? You know, you may be in the, I'm thinking about it, but there's no way in hell I'm going to say anything nice to him. You know, you may be in the, I really feel warmly, but I still feel like I'm not ready to, I mean, there are different stages. So why don't you see where you are in the process of forgiveness? And most of all, those of you who are betrayed spouses, please forgive yourselves for the degree of anger and hurt and fear that you're feeling. You deserve to feel all of that. There is nothing worse than having your entire world pulled out from under you when you thought it was one way and it's something completely different. It just screws up everything. And you have every right to all of the feelings you're having for as long as you need to have them.
So many good things I want to get to with this. So I'm going to keep going. I'm a sex and porn addict, and I've been doing some writing on the theme of resentment lately as part of it. I notice that my role in resentment is often related to not being able to express difficult emotions with some people. How can I improve this part of myself?
This is a great question. And I'll tell you why. Because it speaks to an issue that sex addicts really struggle with. And this may surprise some of you. We have difficulty oftentimes being assertive with people that we care about. We are actually very rejection sensitive, very abandonment phobic, very fearful of judgment. And so it is hard for us to express what we feel and what we need. If we knew what we needed and we knew how to express it and ask for it, we wouldn't go out and have sex with strangers. You know, if you take the sex out of it, and you just think of when I think of myself as an active sex addict going out and looking for anonymous sex, I know what I was looking for. It wasn't love. It wasn't sex. It was to feel validated. It was to feel special. It was to feel important. It was to escape what I was feeling and find an easier, softer place to go where I didn't have to think about what I was dealing with in my life. So the acting out, my sexual acting out and romantic acting out were, in a sense, a way for me to express myself and try to get things I needed that I didn't know how to get in any other way. Well, now that you're not acting out anymore, you're going to find out, I hope, that you have a whole bunch of needs, very healthy needs for attention, for validation, to feel a part of, to have someone be proud of you, to fit in, you know, all of the human needs we have. You're going to maybe start to run into some of those. And I would rather act out than go to somebody and say, hey, I'm feeling a little vulnerable and I wonder if you could spend some time with me. I'd rather act out than do that. So really, this is where the rubber hits the road. When you are in recovery and you are starting to notice that you have things you want to say, things that you have feelings, and it's just so hard to get it out. First of all, I would say practice getting it out if it's an intimate thing like with a spouse. Practice with the sponsors, practice with a therapist what you want to say so that when you're with your spouse, you know exactly what it is, you have some clarity. And second of all, you know, you really, the biggest reveal that you have to reveal is the fact that you're a sex and porn addict. Once that's out, I think everything else is pretty much secondary to your partner. Don't you think they know that, or other people? I guarantee you other people know probably better than you that you're angry sometimes, that you're upset sometimes, that you're, because we don't often express what is clearly on our face. We'll just go and act it out. Not acting out and experiencing your emotions is the first step toward being able to accept them, tolerate them, share them with others, and get your needs met. You're on the right road, but I think having many more people, not just one or two, that you're really being open with, you're somebody who should be in a group that meets once a week, a bunch of people who go to 12-step meetings or therapy. You just meet for coffee and talk about your problems together. You need to be in groups of people to work on being more open, more comfortable expressing yourself and getting your needs met. And that will play out in your intimate relationships with practice.
And I 100% agree with that too. And I think that it does take practice, but I was thinking, learning to build those healthy foundation relationships. You talked about, being in a relationship with somebody where you guys can, or you and the other person can go off the rails or whatever, but that there's that safety, that there's that trust. So it's being able to express sometimes in difficult ways and not always perfectly.
Right.
You're going to get it wrong, but part of the 12-step process is being able to make amends. So, the longer you're in the program, the less often you have to make amends, but they're still there. But early on, it's like, it's like an awesome tool. I can go, and it's not just saying lip service sorry. It's like I'm saying I'm sorry, but I'm also working on changing the behavior. So I always think of it's a pendulum, and like I was way too much this way, and then I'm going to be way too much this way, and I'm going to keep working on getting more in that balance. But practice in a group of people that you can learn to build trust with, so that you have a safe place to practice. So,
And I just typed an expression into the chat for you. I said, and this is something I use with all the
actually, you said it just to me. So, but
Oh,
I'm gonna copy it to everybody.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
So the saying is, tell the truth and tell it faster.
Yeah.
Don't worry so much about the outcome, just spit those words out. And if it doesn't go well, keep spitting them out, and eventually it will. Sometimes you just got to push yourself. And by the way, if you were assertive and aware of your feelings and in touch with them and able to easily ask people how to meet them, you wouldn't be a sex addict.
True. Okay, next one. I think my partner feels overwhelmed and confused with the amount of information that is offered. What advice could you give both of us to help process this issue?
Well, okay, I don't know when you say what information has been offered. I'm not sure what that means. We have a process that we use with therapy, with therapists who know how to do it, called disclosure. And we explore the history of your acting out with your spouse. When we are absolutely certain that they have a therapist, they have support, their hearing this is wrapped around what they're going to do before, what they're going to do after. In other words, we don't just disclose information to spouses. We work very hard to make sure that they are well resourced and well supported so that they are able to tolerate and manage this kind of information. So if your spouse doesn't have a friend to talk to about this with, a therapist, a group, I would say stop giving information until he or she has a place to go to get support. And they can start online, either we're here in this group or they can start in the female spouses group. Again, we offer this stuff for free. And our goal is just that. So you can get on your recovery because your spouse has a place to go to deal with his or her anger and begin to work through it and understand the pacing and I want to say one more thing about that. I can tell you, I've been doing this work 25 years. I've written 10 books. I know this work, and it's a personal issue for me. But I won't be able to help you nearly as much as will the 5 people in that group of women who have been betrayed, or those 4 guys who are online who have betrayed their wives. They are going to be far more valuable to you than me, because the people who are in the moment experiencing the problem with you and trying to work it out in that group that you encounter online, they're going to be a couple of people a little bit ahead of you. They're going to be people a little bit behind you. You're going to be able to understand where you belong and what your next steps are. I cannot tell you strongly enough that no one in this room should do this themselves, and you will not succeed doing this yourself. Sex and love addiction and addiction, period, is in essence a disorder of disconnection, isolation, and intimacy. Unless you reconnect, unisolate, and deeply get bonded, you don't get well. And that's true for both spouses and addicts. Tammy, I wanted to ask if you'd ask the question below that one, because I really like that one.
About the husband in treatment?
Yeah.
Yes. And I want you to get to the next one too. So I'm hopeful. Okay. My husband went to treatment in April. In the past couple of weeks, he told me about 2 lies regarding his behavior post-recovery. Is that typical? We live separately and my inclination is to distance, but what's healthy response to his lying and relapses?
I would say, thank you for sharing. I'm so impressed that you are willing to tell me the truth now. I don't like what I'm hearing, and I'd rather you hadn't lied to me. But the fact that you're telling me the truth now means a lot, and I really appreciate it. That would be my response. Because think about it. Forever, you suspected things and didn't know, and they didn't say. Well, now to have a spouse, a partner saying, I want you to know that I was not truthful to you about this, and I want you to know because it's important. The truth is more important to me than you're getting upset. That's the kind of spouse I want, is one who's willing to be honest, even if they can't be honest in the moment, that they can come back and create clarity later. Yes, it makes me feel like, oh my God, how can I tolerate this? But I would encourage the part of you that would feel like, oh, wow, I'm actually getting the truth now. And that's really more important than whether he is able to be honest in the moment or not. That he's able to come back around and say, you know what, it's important to me that I tell you the truth. I don't want to keep these secrets from you. That's, to me, speaks of healing. Tammy, I want to say something before we go on to the next question. Some of you guys have asked about treatment, about what we do and what I do and all that stuff. So let me just tell you a couple of quick things. First of all, something that's free. I have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. Sex, Love, and Addiction. We found out, 130,000 downloads. That's 130K.
Well, 140,000, but who's counting?
Thank you, Tammy, of people who are listening to the podcast. This means that we're probably in the top 50 or top 100 podcasts in the United States. Our podcast on sex, love, and addiction has 52 episodes with experts from all over the world who are talking about relationship building, addiction, trauma, sexual issues, treatment, you name it. And I highly encourage you, and especially those of you who worry about acting out, put the podcast on in your earbuds or in the car. You'll be thinking about recovery instead of acting out. You'll be listening to the sound of my voice and all of these experts talking about healing. And if you're a spouse who's struggling and not knowing your next steps, I can tell you, Tammy has been listening to these for me, and she tells me that they're really, really good. I don't like to listen to my own work, but you know how that is. But I hear really good things about it. So Sex, Love, and Addiction provides a lot of lengthy discussion and information pieces about this. The other piece I want to say to you is I am doing treatment, and we are doing treatment, and I am running treatment here in Los Angeles. If you
For men.
For men. So if you are a male sex addict, or you are partnered with a male sex addict, or you are a male sex and drug addict, and you see sex and drugs as paired as an issue for you, we are doing that treatment. And I don't know a lot of people who do it better. Sorry, but I don't. And if you want to learn more about our treatment work, it is at seekingintegrity.com. And if you want to know why we call it that, it's because that's what we do. We are constantly seeking more and more integrity in our work, and we are constantly finding new ways we can do it better. And our goal for recovery is that you too will find integrity in your life. That's what the healing process is all about. So that's my little plug. Tammy, you got any more?
Well, there's more I want to do.
Well, okay, but here's the deal. There's 37 of you, so let me tell you this. There were 40. On Friday, I will be on intherooms.com at 6 o'clock. So if you didn't get your question answered tonight, ask me on Friday. I'm on intherooms.com at 6 o'clock. I'll be back here. If you want a question answered personally, I will answer it. Tammy will answer it. If it didn't get answered here, write us a note. We will get back to you. I promise.
Yeah. Or ask early next week, Monday too. But
what do you think about the one in the chat, Tammy? There's a question in the chat.
It wasn't really a question, but okay. So
let's go back to
this one I do want you to talk about. So I'm a sex and love addict in recovery. My best friend has been in a very toxic relationship with her ex-husband for 2 years. I'm considering doing an intervention and blowing the whistle to her family in an effort to get her support. She is so isolated. Everybody in my program is telling me I'm being too codependent. So my question, does your prodependence theory apply to close friends or just spousal situations?
Okay, well, let's break that down a little bit. First of all, I don't think you're being codependent. I think you're being a loving friend who wants to help somebody, and you've got information that you think would help them, and you want to jump in and help. And I think that is prodependence, by the way, is this desire that you have to be a kind, loving person who wants to take advantage of your knowledge to help another person. I would piss on anybody who called that codependency, because to me that's love and intelligence and kindness and empathy. However, the question is, are you the best person to deliver this message? Is this message the right message to deliver? Is this person interested in hearing it? Those are different issues. The fact that you have information and you have a kind heart and you see things doesn't mean that that information would be welcomed or that it would be useful. So, Tammy, why don't you throw something out, because I think you might think of, like, I'm wondering if there are ways to talk to your friend about this. Like what I would do, I would talk to my friend if it were me. Correct. I would go to my best friend and say, this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm working on, this is what I've done, and this is the answers that I've found. If you'd like, I'd love to take you to a meeting with me. I'd love you to take you to therapy with me. I'd love you to bring some books to read. I don't know if you have this issue or not, but what you go through reminds me of what I go through. And if you're anything like me, and since we're good friends, you might be, I think maybe we could look at this issue together. That is what I would do. I would never push myself into someone else's life without permission. Your desire to make it better is loving and pro-dependent. But were you to interfere with her marital life, that is, that's just none of your business, and you don't belong there. And I guarantee you, no matter what your intention is, you're going to make enemies that way. If I'm a recovering alcoholic, I don't go to my best friend who is an alcoholic's family and tell them all the things I've learned about alcoholism and how they must get my friend sober. I go to my friend and say, dude, I'm a drunk and I think you are too. Let's go to a meeting together. That's how you make that decision.
Well, and you say she's so isolated, help perhaps make healthy connections. I've talked before about, it isn't just therapy. Therapy's great, but I also have healthy relationships with, people I hike with. My husband and I are ballroom dancing, so we're doing that, and we've got friends there. So we're making healthy connections that take me out of things that would be problematic. And so rather than just being isolated and having to deal with this toxic relationship all the time, there are ways to make healthy connections that are positive without being just about dealing with a problem.
Here's an idea. Invite your friend to sit with you on one of our Zoom meetings for female sex and love addicts. And she can sit in the room with you watching the screen and see what those women talk about. She doesn't even need to leave the house. But I do want to say something about you. This person had a follow-up statement, and it's so typical for someone in this situation that I want to comment on it, and then I think we have to stop. She said, I feel like this, I think it's a woman, I feel like I'm at a point in my recovery that's actually hard for me to be with this friend and that situation because it's painful to watch and you can't do anything about it. Well, sister, I'm here to tell you that part of recovery in the most meaningful way is we have to redress our friendships and relationships and say, which one of these are really supporting and promoting my own growth and healing and which ones are not. And the ones that are, I spend more time with, and the ones that aren't, I spend less time with. And at this point in your recovery, I think it is more important for you to work on your own healing. But to, I don't think you have to drag your friend into anything. A little note, hey, would you like to watch this thing with me online? Would you, just a few invitations. And here's one other thing. You might consider buying a book on sex and love addiction and just saying, here's something you might want to read. This has helped me. But do not, repeat, do, underline, not, underline, get involved in someone else's family life without talking to them and involving them first. You're not her sister, you're not her daughter, and you're not the one who's going to do an intervention, and you will get shut out of that family so quick, you will forget that you were ever friends. So don't do that. But
it probably won't help the friend in the long run anyway. You'll be shut out, but probably a hot mess all the way around. So,
but from a pro-dependent perspective, your desire to do that is nothing more than loving and kind and wonderful. And I wish I had more friends like you. Don't let anybody call you codependent. And with that, I'm going to say thanks, guys.
Thank you. And to those that we didn't get answered, please do come back and ask again. So.
All right, and we'll answer. It's a pleasure. We'll see you. I'll see you guys on Friday, or if not before. Have a great week.
Bye everybody.